All right, everyone. Hello and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast. Now, we have a very special guest with us today. Our next guest serves as editor-in-chief for Tokyo Poetry Journal and the co-founder of KOTOBA, the National Poetry Slam of Japan. They produce programs for BBC Radio 4 on Japanese poetry and culture, and is the author of poetry books, also a translator of many of Japan's leading poets. He uses every means possible to bring Japanese poetry to the world. Welcome to the podcast, Jordan A.Y. Smith. Jordan, how are you today?
I'm great. Oh, nothing like sitting down to talk poetry with a new friend. I'm excited for the time and I appreciate you adding me to the lineup. Thanks, Amanda.
Absolutely, Jordan. Of course, of course. So I found out about your work just through basically living here in Japan now and going through kind of just the socials as a spoken word artist myself. I feel like no matter where we go in the world, we got to go look for poetry and people doing it just like us. And I was able to find a Tokyo Poetry Journal. And I was really intrigued, being in a place like Japan. I know Japan does have a very long oral tradition history. What brought you here into Japan and now doing, serving as, editor-in-chief for Tokyo Poetry Journal, also with KOTOBA. Let's go back. What really brought you here in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great questions. I've been in and out of Japan for about 20 years now. The first time I came, it was for love. I was living in Korea and ended up dating and then marrying a Japanese young lady. And so she was my inspiration to begin studying the language and kind of get into. I read the literature in English before that, but never really thought that learning the language would be possible. I was in my mid 20s, so I was kind of like, oh, I think it's too late. My ship has sailed. There's no way I can do Japanese. Um, but it was, inspiring to meet her family and want to talk with them on a deeper level. And then I went back to LA, to Los Angeles after a year in Tokyo, and then I did graduate school. So I studied comparative literature at UCLA, and then became a professor for, I don't know, I guess 3, 4, 5 years, something like that. And
Oh.
so the second time when I came to Japan, I came for poetry, and I had been translating a poet, Mizuta Noriko, and some of her poems had won an award, and she invited me to come to Japan for the award ceremony. And when I came, I mean, I knew that she was an academic, and I knew she was also a researcher and an administrator at a university, but I didn't quite fully realize she was the chancellor of a university system here. And so when I came for that, she was like, "Thank you for the translations of my poems. They were lovely. It's really nice to meet you. Why don't you come here and be a professor?" And I was kind of like, "Okay, sounds good." So a few months later, I just moved here, and we opened up the International Modern Poetry Center at Josai International University. So I literally came here for poetry 7 years ago.
Whoa, 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 whoa. So you got to go back. That is the greatest job at job opportunity. So you just by happenstance, you translated for the chancellor of the university. Then she's like, you want a job here? And you just became a full-time professor.
It was pretty much like that. And I was a professor
Wow.
in LA at that time. I was teaching at Long Beach, at California State University, Long Beach, and I was really happy there. I loved the job.
For sure. Long
But
Beach is a great place.
sometimes like opportunity knocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's great. I love my colleagues, I love my students, love the classes, but sometimes you just gotta have that adventure. And I mean, you must have a similar story because here you are in Japan. It's a big world, and like to move across oceans to get here, like there's got to be some kind of force, and
For
that
sure.
that was mine.
No, that's quite an amazing story. No, yeah, no, you know what? It's totally related, like this serendipity. I remember I was just talking to a friend yesterday how just basically anything the pandemic has taught us, just life, you must just maximize your opportunities because you never know where they'll pop out from. So kind of speaking on your opportunities, that's absolutely amazing. So tell us a little bit about it. So you were teaching just the center you all created was called Jesuit University, or am I getting that correct?
Oh yeah, yeah, sorry. It's called Josai. So the
Mhm.
actual university is Josai International University, and then we created the International Modern Poetry Center there.
Nice. Okay. So that started here in Japan, correct?
Yep,
What part
yep.
of Japan were you all located at during that time then? Was it still in Tokyo, based in Tokyo?
Yeah, so that university has a couple campuses, and one of them is way out in deep Chiba. So
Mm,
it's about like 2 hours by train from Tokyo. And then we also have a campus that is right in the center of Tokyo, like 2 blocks from the Imperial Palace, 2 blocks from the like the Diet building where all the center of political power is. So
mm.
we had like two campuses, and I taught at both. So I lived right in the middle in Chiba, which, like, if people are tuning in from outside Japan, Chiba is where Tokyo Disney is. So it's it's
Mm.
like outside of Tokyo by about 40 minutes, something like that.
Nice, nice. Okay. So kind of venturing from that then, you then so you were teaching there for a while in that area of Chiba, which is like kind of like, so like for folks that don't know, again, that's very close to Tokyo but not quite Tokyo, like a prefecture kind of neighboring outside neighboring city almost to Tokyo. So you were teaching there for a while, and then tell us, how did you fall into editor-in-chief of Tokyo Poetry Journal, then co-founding KOTOBA? Where did this kind of fall in line with your journey?
Yeah, I mean, all of these worlds are kind of interlinked in Tokyo, and this is one of the things I really love about the Tokyo poetry world is there are so many different lines connecting everybody. So we were doing, poetry events at Josai that were kind of academic. They would often combine like a symposium with like literary critics and literary historians, and then like poets on stage reading.
Mm,
And as I hung out with those people, I started going to more like poetry events out in the city, away from the university. And the city of Tokyo has a lot of spaces dedicated to poetry, and a lot of spaces that you wouldn't think about as like poetry places, just like nightclubs and
yeah.
bars and cafes and art galleries. But they become poetry spaces. And so slowly I started going out into those spaces more and more, and like getting to know um, people in different poetry communities. And there's a few poets that, like, how there's kind of in some ways, there's a bit of a division in the poetry world. Like, there's poets who like write on paper and publish in the kind of scholarly literary journals that are respected by kind of more like mainstream presses and
Hmm.
traditional literary groups. And then there's more of like the performance poets,
Yeah.
like the ones who, if you only read Japanese poetry, you'll never meet these people because they're not publishing. They are performing on stage,
Yeah.
but there's a few poets that kind of go back and forth between those worlds, and I started hanging out with them and going to poetry events, and then um, I started, because I was translating a lot of poets. Um, I was invited to become the Japanese poetry editor for Topojo. Topojo is what we call Tokyo Poetry Journal, so for short,
Mm.
Topojo. And so I started out as the Japanese editor there, and I was just like trying to introduce a new generation of Japanese poets to the world, like, because
Nice.
everything
Yeah.
that gets translated is usually pretty old writers. I mean, that's kind of not a respectful way to put it, but it's a fact. I mean, they're older. They're in their 70s, they're in their 80s,
Yeah.
they've had long illustrious careers. So I was trying to translate some of the younger generation, and I edited a volume for them that was featuring only writers who have never had a book published in English. So they
Hmm.
had to be like, Japanese, writing in Japanese, and never had a book out. And so it was a really cool, like, innovative volume, I think, and I met a lot of friends through that. And some of the friends and some of the people I translated, they were also performance poets, they were slam poets, and there was a thing in Japan that was run by a guy named Murata Katsuhiko.
Mm,
And Murata invited me to participate in Poetry Slam Japan, as it was called at the time. I think they did about 5 years worth of events, and he asked me if I'd want to compete. And
mm,
because I was at the time, like I was translating so much Japanese and I was kind of in that world, I started writing in Japanese and then I started writing in between Japanese and English. So I would
okay.
just like let the words kind of flow in and out of languages. And and I thought, you know what, whatever, I'm just gonna go ahead and try the poetry slam. And people might not like it because there's some English in there and it's kind of my own funky style that like I have no idea who would like it, but whatever, I'm just gonna try this out because it's not about me doing something people will like. It's about me having a good time with the community and getting to know people and like giving it a try, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just like put my issues aside and like went for it, and I was really surprised. I became like the audience favorite at the regional, and so
Mm,
like I got to go to the finals, and then I ended up getting second place, and I almost won. I was like 0.1 point away in the totals from being
mm,
the champion, and I was kind of like, whoa, I was not expecting that. Um,
yeah.
but so and then after that, yeah, I became the translator for Poetry Slam Japan. So I every year whoever won, I would translate their poetry. So when they went to the Poetry World Cup in Paris, they would use my English translations for those.
Wow. Okay. Nice. 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 So that's a very interesting thing. Like, we like on this podcast, I've talked to a couple of slam poets before, and it seems almost like a lot don't have any idea of how good they are until like they come until they win the whole competition. I remember I talked to someone earlier and she was like, yeah, I just randomly walked in, never tried slam poetry, and she had took in first place. So how you also were not aware of how good you were. Like you were like coming like point one, basically came so close to, I mean, just basically annihilating the competition. Was it, you said again, point one points away? What is it, what is up with
Yeah.
that? I'm always so curious. How is it that everyone does not know that they're just these amazing slam poets or just poets in general until they win a whole championship? It's crazy.
It is. It is. I mean, it's definitely the thing I like about it too, because the world of poetry slams, at least definitely in Japan, I can't speak for the whole world, but for Japan, you're getting people who are not necessarily traditional poets, not necessarily traditional writers. They're writing in a way that people are wanting to hear and kind of need to hear, but it's not a way that's necessarily recognized or taught. And so it's oftentimes people who like love literature, but they love literature in like their own funky weird way, and they write in their own funky weird way. So
Mm,
teachers have often been like, oh, that's wrong, or that's
yeah,
weird, or I don't, that doesn't fit what literature is supposed to be. So they kind of get that embedded in them, and it's only when
yeah.
they step out of that and into the living breathing world of literary performance that they realize like, oh, I wasn't alone, you know.
Absolutely no. I'm kind of, speaking on that, speaking on Japan and its kind of history of spoken word and poetry and literature, for your work with Topajo as well as KOTOBA, why do you think Japan is a place, like you said, like it's all over, like in spoken word is found in these places that people wouldn't even expect, like bars, whatever may have you. Why do you think Tokyo and just Japan in general, why do you think it's become this hub for poetry and spoken word?
Oh, it's such a good question. Man, I'll try to answer and not talk for 2 hours. It's just such an amazing it's such an amazing history. So the poetry scene here really should probably be called like the poetry scenes. And there are two worlds that kind of mix but are also kind of separate. There's the English speaking poetry world here, which is made up of people from all over the place. You've got, a lot of writers, obviously, from the US. A lot of people come here, to teach English, either in the JET program or as professors. and then, and then kind of that built a bit of a literary scene. And it was also anchored by people who came here to study, Buddhism or different types of arts, traditional Japanese arts or otherwise. The beat poetry world had a big presence in
Mm,
Japan. Um,
mm,
there were a number of writers who spent, quite a long time here. Gary Snyder being probably the most famous, but there were a number of other poets from the beat tradition who came over here and spent, a handful of years or sometimes a few decades. Some are still here. And at least one of the founders of Tokyo Poetry Journal, Taylor Mignon, is heavily influenced by that beat style. He's kind of like a cross between the beats and surrealism. And but the
mm.
beats and their kind of performative tradition and their kind of counterculture tradition also grew into the Japanese poetry world through writers like Sakaki Nanao, who was good friends with a lot of the beats and performed with Allen Ginsberg and
Mm.
translated some of his stuff. And so those two traditions kind of merged, and then oh, you can see my hat here. So this
Yeah.
says Ueno Poetrican Jam, and that's the Poetrican is the reference to New Yorican, and so they
Mm.
changed it from New Yorican to Poetrican. But the New Yorican scene in New York with the kind
Yes.
of the beginning of poetry slam culture, right? Like they pay tribute to that. So Murata Katsuhiko was really influenced by that movement. And then when Murata kind of stepped down as the director of Poetry Slam Japan, rather than continue it, we all kind of agreed that we'll kind of redo it in a new format and give it a new name. And that new name is KOTOBA. And so, for listeners out there who don't speak Japanese, kotoba means word or words in Japanese. So it's kind of like saying word slam or language slam, and
Mm.
it's really to give the broadest possible definition of what a slam is. We didn't even want people to be bound by the word poetry. Like, you don't. I mean, it ends up being poetry, but don't feel like what you have to produce is like a
Yeah.
poem. Just it's a language experience, can only be language, and bring it to the stage and rock it. So Miki Yuri came to me and asked if I would like to work with her, kind of co-founding Kotoba Slam Japan. And my background was basically just that I'd come in second, and then I made national finals one other time, and
Yeah.
uh, and then I was a translator. That was like all my credentials. Her credentials though are insane. She was the first woman to ever win Poetry Slam Japan, and
Wow.
she was also the first two-time winner. So she won back to back, and
Wow.
she's an amazing poet. You're gonna meet her in a few weeks, I believe, and I'm so excited to introduce you guys. You'll
Yeah.
have wonderful conversation. But she's my idol. I love her. She is a great poet, great person, total force of nature. So when she reached out to me and asked if I would like to help set that up, I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I think she wanted somebody who kind of also had credentials in the literary world, and I like
Yeah.
me being a professor and like Tokyo Poetry Journal, and then also kind of knowing this world of the slam and knowing a lot of poets there, personally, just as a friend, I think she thought we'd be a good team. So um,
Mm.
she's done most of the work. I helped kind of set it up and helped it get going, and I still help with the national finals. But she runs like all the local, they call them Chiki Taikai, which is the
Mm.
regional slams. So yeah, we've been doing that now. This is the second year. And last year, the national finalist was Ishiwata Kimi, a
Mm.
wonderful, also a woman who won. And she's a poet that I translated for Tokyo Poetry Journal like back in 2017. And then she couldn't go to Paris because of COVID. Nobody was traveling
Yeah, man.
for last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
But this year, we're optimistic, and we'll find out the winner of the National Slam like in just a few weeks. So hopefully they can make it to Paris this year.
December 12th is when this slam is. So just a couple,
That's
yeah,
right.
just under 2 weeks. No, definitely looking forward to going out there for that. Definitely, it's gonna be a good time. So, Jordan, you're dropping some absolute gems. I mean, like for those that are listening that are just big poetry lovers, I mean, I think people are just salivating at what you're talking about because I don't think a lot of people have any clue about Japan's spoken word scene. And coming out here, I'm very shocked, honestly. You know, like I just had no idea. You know what I mean? Even just this idea of people slamming in Japanese, in the Japanese language, really just I feel like we just as a I haven't seen that, honestly, and I think a lot of listeners and viewers feel the same way. So you're definitely dropping a lot of gems and some good history for us all. Um, so for you, what for your own just personal style of writing, when you write your own poetry, are you it's difficult to ever, no, in no way could anyone ever niche anybody as a poet because it's such a far-reaching world that we exist in. Sometimes maybe you want to write about love, sometimes you want to write about depression, sometimes you want to write about family, sometimes you want to write about hate. There's so many things that you want to write about. How would you describe yourself as a writer, from just when you started to where you are now on your journey?
Wow, that's amazing. What a question. I mean, when I first started writing, I think like everybody, I started by, imitating the writers that I thought were amazing, the
Mm,
writers who I thought were powerful and who were expressing themselves in a way that I'd never seen. And, when
yeah.
you're a kid, like I wrote from when I was a kid, and so, I imitated writers like LL Cool J
Oh,
and
wow.
like Run DMC, who I grew up with, like kind of back in the 80s when hip hop was just starting to spread, and it was like me and a
Yeah.
couple of friends out in California in our little small town, kind of a rural town, growing up on that music, and so I was heavily influenced by like real early hip hop from the beginning, and that's still like a part of my style. Um, and but then like over the years, I spent a lot of time in like literary theory and like critical theory and philosophy. So I was really into everything from, sort of typical like post-structuralism and psychoanalysis and trippy, theories about language and power and the mind. And a lot of that is also fit with my politics, which is pretty left, pretty
Mm,
liberal, and so it was a kind of a good combination for me. And where I ended up was I did a lot of writing that blended like critical literary theory with that kind of politics and then a bit of a hip hop style to it. And
mm,
and then when I came to Japan and started getting into translation and really, I translated like 3 or 4 poets before I moved back to Japan in 2014. But after I came here, within a matter of years, I translated, 5, 10, 20, 30. I don't know
yeah.
where it's at right now, 50 or 100, or I don't even know. I work with any poet that I have time to translate who I love. I just translate it and try to get it out there in the world. But when I started doing that, then I realized that all of their styles were passing through me, and I was kind of absorbing really, really different literary styles from writers like Yoshimasa Gozo, who also writes in 5 or 6 different languages sometimes, and does
Yeah.
really wild things, wild performances where he paints and does poetry at the same time and
Mm,
stabs the
mhm.
paintings and sets them on fire, and
Wow.
all
Yeah.
kinds of like wild performance art stuff. So the more I started um doing that, the more I kind of felt language coming out of me in Japanese. And at that
Mm,
point, it was like I had the Japanese, but I don't have a lot of familiarity with Japanese hip hop. I just have not found a lot that really vibed with me. Like their sense of rhyme and rhythm, it just like not all of them, but really almost everybody. I just was not feeling it. And I kind of wanted to produce something in Japanese that also felt like me, and see if I could find a new way to be me, not
mm,
just in Japanese, but between languages. Because I realized that like for me to write only in Japanese, even though I was kind of living my life in Japanese, I was teaching classes in Japanese, I was translating, I was speaking on panels and at academic events like in Japanese. So I was definitely in that zone, but there was still a part of me that's like needed the English. And so I think for me, I was inspired by people like Gloria Anzaldúa
Mm-hmm.
and like
Yeah.
her writing on borderlands and border identity. And I was just
Yeah.
like, you know what, my border is the Pacific Ocean, and I am produced somewhere between California and Tokyo, and that's okay. And if no one wants to listen to that, that's okay. I don't really care, but I
Yeah.
have the right to also talk about that identity, and it's valid. And so that was kind of my departure point. Um, and then after that, it was like 4 years of like being super pissed off and disappointed about Donald Trump, and wishing our world would be
Yeah.
a kinder, happier, more beautiful place, and just trying to figure out a way to make that happen.
Word. No, I think that's a that's a pretty monumentous journey. And I think more than anything, it shows like we never stop. Like the journey of being a writer, you never truly stop. Like you'll be in this one phase, maybe at this one point in your life. Then, like you said, Dazadula with the borders, your borders change as the more you grow in this life, the borders will look different, each stage in your life. So I think it's pretty marvelous. So do tell me, I'm curious, what as we're having our interview come to a wrap now, what is in the future? What's 2021 with the remainder? We have about 1 month left, 2021, 2022, looking for Tokyo Poetry Journal as well as KOTOBA, as well as any of your other projects that you're doing.
Oh, there's so much coming up. The most immediate things coming out are, the KOTOBA finals are coming, so that's going to be great. And
Yeah,
I'm going to choose three winners of that to publish in Tokyo Poetry Journal, so I'm excited for that. Tokyo Poetry Journal is producing one more volume where I'll be editor in chief, and then like a regular volume, and then I'm doing a all translation volume with a bunch of new poets coming out like next year. And then after that, I'm going to step down as editor in chief and pass it over to Jeffrey Johnston, one of the co-founders. And then there's a few books coming out from Tokyo Poetry Journal. Now has a kind of like a line of books, and we've published about 5 books so far, and we've got a few more coming out. One of them is super cool. It's a book on architecture and poetry, where they had 14 Japanese poets go out into works of residential architecture by
mm,
famous Japanese architects. And like because we're all spending a lot of time at home these days,
yeah,
we wanted to like look at poetry, or look at the home through the lens of poetry and appreciate it more, because we're all here.
yeah,
And so I translated that book into English, and we're publishing it in January. In February, Black History Month, we have a Black Diaspora volume that Bianca Bailey and Marcellus Neely are guest editing for us. I'm super excited about that.
nice,
Um, and then the other big thing, and I'll keep it to just January and February because I like there's so much going on. If I even go beyond that, like it'll take me hours. But
crazy,
the other big thing I'm excited about is the launch of a new poetry and technology collective called Cōem, like COEM.
mm-hmm.
And it's pretty wild. Cōem is a portmanteau of code and poem. So it's like coding, like software coding, and then poem. And so what we do is we put software engineers and poets in conversation with each other to
Mm,
see what we could produce. And the
mm,
first project, called Geopossession, involving producing 3D audio holograms that we're going to geoposition around Tokyo in an app by a company called Calcul. It's a new startup with this app called the Aura. And a Japanese poet, Nagai Yuki, and myself are putting that together, and we've got like recordings of 13 Japanese poets plus myself, and
mm.
they're amazing writers,
Wow.
serious big guns for this project, and we're launching that January 15th. And then after that, like Cōem is now officially like a nonprofit organization in Japan, and so we're gonna keep pushing forward with all of that. And beyond that, I mean, there's a few more books coming out. I want to try to find some time for my own writing and just supporting all the people I can through translation.
Amazing. Oh my God, Jordan. No, that sounds phenomenal. That last part with the combining the poets with someone working at the tech development, I think that's gonna be pretty phenomenal, honestly. So folks listening, please do look forward to that. Keep your eyes on Japan. So Jordan, our very before we part from this amazing interview and this amazing conversation, gonna ask you the age-old question on the Poet Speaks podcast. Why do you need to get your words out?
Whew. Man, I mean, there's so many ways of answering that too. I would say, I mean, since it's phrased as like, why do I need? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
I need to do it because if I don't do it, I just don't feel healthy. I just don't feel like I'm being myself, and I don't feel like I'm connecting with the world. If I just greet the world with my face and some handshakes and some hugs, or or by teaching or something, it's not enough. Like it has to be at that level where I put something out into the world that I don't even understand, but I know it's me. And then the
Mm-hmm.
world helps me understand myself through it. But it's mostly like I feel the need to keep doing that because I don't want people to give up on creation in these difficult times, and I don't want people to just stay home
Yeah.
and rot and be depressed. Like we have to fight to stay, up. We have to fight to stay in a mode of caring in
Yeah.
a time like this, because I think if we slip into depression and we slip into isolation, there's people out there in the world who are going to take advantage of that,
Mm.
not just at the individual level, but at the global level. We have to keep our eyes open and our spirits bright so that we can continue to make the world a better place. And I know that sounds like a Hallmark card, but I mean that with all my heart. And every time I make a decision to show up at an event, or do a performance, or even just go listen to other people's performance, I sometimes have to just drag myself out of my little cave
Mm.
in central Tokyo and just get out there, because it sends a message to people that like we got to show up for each other. So that's pretty much why I do what I do these days.
And that's a very beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Jordan. Yes, absolutely. We got to show up for each other. Even if you have to drag yourself up out of anywhere you are, definitely show up and show your best for sure. Well, thank you so much, Jordan. This was a really great, fun, interesting, very, very educational conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the Poet Speaks podcast. Before we leave, tell us, where can we find your stuff? Where can we find out more about all these amazing things you're doing? Website, Instagram, Twitter.
For sure. Thank you. Let's see. So Tokyo Poetry Journal is topojo.com, Topojo.com. Cōem is just Cōem.art. So Coem.art. And then I'm on Instagram as Jordan Giraffe. And what else? That's probably the easiest way to connect up. I have a number of other social media sites through Tokyo Poetry Journal. Like we have our Instagram. Cōem has an Instagram. But if you check those couple of pages, you'll be able to find me. And please, like everybody, I know the borders are kind of shut down, at the moment. But if you make it to Tokyo, or if you want to do an event with people in Tokyo, or otherwise connect either to Japanese poets or to people here, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would love to be in touch, and I'd love to know what else is going on out there in the world of poetry. Thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jordan. Thank you so much for being a guest today on the podcast. We had a great talk. Again, thank you so much, Jordan. This was a really dope conversation.
Thank you, Amanda.
All right. And everyone, this is the Poet Speaks podcast, and we will talk a little bit later. Bye-bye.